All right, we are live. Thanks for joining us here. And Derrick Evans, of course, your host here on Smarter San Diego. And I have a fellow veteran advocate joining me today. She's an attorney with Veterans Law Group. Amanda Meneer is here. Amanda, how you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's great to have you. Now, we both spend our days, fighting on behalf of veterans. You have a sort of a specific area of law when it comes to the VA and helping veterans get their benefits. I wanted to have you on today because I think this is something where I talk to veterans all the time who say, "Oh, I should have got a disability rating, or I should have gotten this, I should have gotten that. I haven't gone through the paperwork, or I got denied initially, and I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to go through it." And I believe these veterans who that they deserve this, and that there should be a solution for it. And I'm hoping you can help be the solution for some of these people and help give us some advice on this. So, tell us a little bit about what you do with Veterans Law Group, and we'll kind of dive into the conversation of how we can get specific with helping people here.
Sure, absolutely. And I agree 100%. I always tell veterans that this isn't really asking for a handout. It's part of the contract and what you signed up for when you signed up for your contract with the to serve in the military. So, what we do here is we're primarily working on cases where a veteran has been received a decision and is unhappy with it, or just wants to have it checked out and made sure that they did get what they were entitled to. So, in some cases, it's a straight out denial. Maybe they applied for PTSD and got denied for their PTSD. There can be all kinds of reasons for that. Or you're looking at whether or not you were properly rated. So maybe you got a PTSD rating of 30% and you want to know if that's correct. Or you feel like it should be higher, say if you're struggling to hold down a job, or dealing with a little bit more severe symptoms.
Yeah, and we want to be clear that we don't think that the VA is out to screw people over or anything like that. I mean, that's certainly not what we want to imply here by any means. But the fact is that there are millions of veterans out there. The VA is a very big organization, and sometimes mistakes are made. Sometimes people just don't quite know how to ask, or maybe they were afraid to ask, or maybe they're afraid to talk about a problem they're having. I know an individual that I know that's a personal friend of mine who said, yeah, I should have told them about this when I was getting my VA, but I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole. That was the time to bring it up. And so I have a question for you. So let's say that happens, and I went in and I didn't tell them everything that was wrong, and maybe I was afraid or ashamed, or I just didn't want to go down that road. And can I revisit? Can you always revisit, or can you only revisit a certain amount of time, or how does that work if I want to go back and check on this?
You can always reopen a claim. What they're going to look at if you were previously denied is whether or not you have what they call new and relevant evidence. So, and that could be as simple as you didn't previously tell them what happened to you, and now you're telling them. So we see that. I personally see that. I handle the majority of the MST, the military sexual trauma cases here in our office. And we see that a lot where they didn't want to go down that road. And so maybe they filed an initial claim and then they didn't follow up with any additional paperwork as to what happened to them. But yes, you can always reopen a claim as long as you have something new, some sort of new piece of evidence, which again can just be your statement to submit with a reopen of a claim.
Gotcha. Okay. So when it comes to a situation like this, if there's new information, you can always revisit. And that's something where I think a lot of people, who are out right now, who haven't gone here, and I've noticed this personally with older veterans. It seems to be a lot of older veterans who, maybe there was a stigma attached to it back in the, those older veterans, they were in the tough guy age, where, you never said you were cold, you never needed a jacket, they were this tough guy age, and no, I don't need this, but I'm fine. I can walk. Look at me, and no one talked about PTSD for a long time.
Right.
It was like it just wasn't something that was discussed. Do you notice that a difference there with that? Is it a lot of older veterans who have no claim, have made no claim when they should have?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more talked about, and there's a lot more education in people getting out of the military now than there was, say, in the Vietnam era. And then added on top of it with those Vietnam veterans, they were often told to keep their mouth shut and don't even tell anybody that they served in Vietnam because it was so controversial. So many of them just got used to not even talking about it. So we see a couple of things of, yes, in PTSD, they didn't know what it was and it wasn't something that was widely talked about. And now it's more talked about. And so a lot of times they'll go back and end up doing like a reunion with their unit and find out that some of their other battle buddies have filed for PTSD, and they realize, oh, I have all of those symptoms too. So then they'll, and a lot of times, sometimes too, it's a spouse that helps kind of nudge them to go get some help. And that would includes kind of filing a claim so that they can get paid for getting counseling and that kind of thing. So definitely the older veterans that didn't file back then. We also have seen that a lot of times the PTSD symptoms get worse after retirement. And there's some, articles out there medically as to why that is, but that's another thing, kind of a good point to know, is not only can you reopen a case, but if you were rated at 10% for your back 20 years ago and your back has gradually gotten worse, that's another thing some of the older veterans don't know, is that they can reopen it to get a higher percentage if it's gotten worse.
That is a great piece of information. So if your symptoms from the same ailment have gotten worse over time, that is a legit cause to reopen.
Absolutely. I was just talking to somebody today who said his uncle, who was a World War II veteran, got like $80 a month for 40 years about his hearing. And by the time he died, he couldn't hear at all. And he could have, reopened that case a long time ago and got an increase.
Tell us how is this made up for people who may be out and who maybe haven't applied for any benefits regarding disability through the VA? How do you, do they need to, first of all, contact someone like yourself first, or do they need to go to the VA first? What's a good order of operations for someone doing this?
One of my biggest tips that I tell veterans all the time is don't do it alone. So, and walking into the VA and talking to the VA benefits office is equivalent to doing it alone. My recommendation, so nobody can charge a veteran a fee. It's by law to file an initial claim. So if you've got a representative out there who says, yeah, I'll help you do it, it's going to cost you $1,000, they're actually violating the law. So it's important that veterans know that. And that's to initially file via paperwork. When we get involved, again, is on an appeals level. But my recommendation is to go to a DAV, VFW. Here in San Diego County, they have the Veteran and Military Affairs Office at the counties. They all have claims agents that will help you fill out the paperwork and submit it. And they're going to know, what paperwork needs to be filled out. Again, it's the VA. It's very bureaucratic. You got to have the right form and cross all the T's and dot all the I's. So definitely start there. And then if you get a decision and you want it renewed, that's where we would come in.
Okay, so go through the process, fill out the paperwork. Now, what are some of the things that qualify? I think a lot of people may believe, we just talked about PTSD. A lot of people may believe that it has to be a physical ailment of some sort, or has to be to a certain degree a physical ailment. What qualifies you for a VA disability rating? And some of those things maybe people aren't aware of or didn't know that would count.
Yeah, absolutely. Any injury that was either incurred or aggravated during your service. So that's another kind of myth or misconception, as people think, well, I had this injury before I went into the service. But the military, once they accept you and you serve over 90 days, especially from a psychological standpoint, then they say, okay, we've accepted you as you are, and any injury that you had pre-existing that is aggravated by service will then pay you for as well. One of the biggest ones that I see a lot is when veterans are have been let go out of the military with a personality disorder. And there's a myth out there that says, oh, okay, that's like the mark of death. It's you can't get a claim through for a psychological disorder if it's personality disorder. And the truth is the VA will deny you for a personality disorder, but most of the time that's a misdiagnosis. I call it a cop-out. They may have bipolar, they may have schizophrenia, they may have PTSD, anxiety, depression. There's all kinds of other things that are compensated by the VA. Personality disorder is kind of just that, well, we don't want to, dig into the diagnosis, so we're just going to dismiss it. But any physical ailments and then mental health, to include bipolar and schizophrenia, that one is commonly misunderstood as being something that's not compensated, and they say just PTSD from a mental health.
So it could be physical things that were aggravated during the time of service, could be physical pains or ailments that happened during the time of service, could be mental things that came as a result of service or were aggravated during the time of service. Is that right?
Absolutely. And it's just during the time you were under contract, or if you were reserved, if you were under active duty training or you were activated. It doesn't mean that you had to be in the line of duty. So for example, if you were injured in a car accident on a weekend, you're still entitled to compensation if it was during the time that you were serving in the military.
Okay, so as long as it's during your active duty service period, did not have to be a result of active duty service, but as long as it, during that, even if it was at midnight when you were off duty and someone T-boned you and on the road, that actually those injuries would qualify you for VA disability.
Absolutely. And another one that's kind of misunderstood as well is that I referred to military sexual trauma earlier. And a lot of people think that it has to be a military member who was the who perpetuated the MST, and it doesn't have to be. It can be a civilian. It's all really about who the veteran is and when they were in active duty.
That's a good, that's a very good point that you make there. I have never talked about this before, but have had an unnerving number of people that I have talked to in my time who said that they were, I don't want to say assaulted, but approached uncomfortably in a sexual manner, were propositioned in different ways like this. Those can obviously cause emotional scarring and potentially cognitive issues. Something like that also involved here. Someone experienced something like that. Would that fit in here anywhere?
There usually has to be an incident that you can point to. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, if it was just a long history of harassment, you're going to have a hard time with that. But if there was a particular incident or it was like ongoing from a particular person, we can certainly argue those. They are not easy cases. They typically have to go up several levels of appeal and have testimony before a judge. But again, that's where we get involved. I often say that you shouldn't have to hire an attorney to get a VA disability claim through the process, but there are hard cases out there, and those are the ones that we work on.
Tremendous. And I think, what let's go down some of the things that are kind of, thank you for answering these questions, by the way, and for taking your time to do this. I just want to make people aware. I want people who were serving in the community, the veterans of San Diego, and frankly, through YouTube, we talk to veterans all over the country. I want them to know that there are people who will fight for them, and there are solutions, and that there's also, a lot of people who may be on the sidelines here who should be taking the benefit that they have earned. This is not a handout. This is not some freebie. This is not, some government assistance. This is, as you mentioned, a contract that you have with the military, and that they are going to take care of you if certain things happen. And so you deserve it. If you can qualify for VA disability, then it's something that you deserve. There's no way to get it if you don't deserve it. So what can we expect? Is there anything like on the horizon or, happening with the VA, this year or in the coming months or years that we should be aware of?
Yeah, and I want to address what you just said, though, which is really important, is a lot of times what happens is some of the most difficult cases we work on are ones where they waited like 20 years to file a claim for, say, a back injury. And maybe they didn't file when they got out of service because their back wasn't that bad. And so they were like, oh, I don't really need it. And then 20 years later, that back injury has gotten worse and worse and worse to the point that maybe they can't even work anymore. And that's the hard case, because you have to argue to the VA that, well, I didn't have multiple injuries after I got out of the service. It all started in the military. It just got worse over time. So even if you're willing to file and you end up getting 0% or 10%, the fact that you got it service connected, the VA is already acknowledging that your back injury is related to service. So later, as it gets worse, all you're saying is my back has gotten worse. You don't have to reprove that it was related to your service. So I see that a lot where people think, oh, I don't need it right now. And it's like, okay, even if you don't need it, get that service connected. And if you don't want the money, donate it to charity or whatever you want to do, to the VFW or something like that.
Yeah.
But kind of getting to the rest of your question as to the new things that are coming up, COVID turned the VA upside down. And a year before COVID, they changed the entire appeals process, which turned it upside down. And it was already a mess to begin with. So when it comes to predicting 2020, it's kind of like, well, we'll see. They are starting to do more outsourced comp and pen exams, which is part of the process. Once you file a claim, you have to get an examination. And they've outsourced most of those, which is making them happen a little quicker. But there's still some of the outsourced organizations that are closed down. So part of it is like what's going to happen with the VA is kind of what's going to happen with the country as we move forward. But I will tell you that they're a bureaucracy, and they, it's, again, you said earlier, it's not always their fault. A lot of times it's the veteran's not giving them what they need. When you work with a representative, my job is to make it super easy for the VA to grant your case, to put all the ducks in a row so the VA can just go check, check, check. We got everything that we need. But as to what's going to happen, from the last 2 years, I hope nothing new is going to happen this year, because we're still wrapping our brains around, and the VA, walking through the VA, not even understanding their own rules at this point in time.
Yeah, that's, I mean, here's the reality is the VA, because it's such a big organization, even if it were run privately, it would still have lots of clunkiness. The fact that it's run by the government, and I think because a lot of people, veterans who are coming out of service, they already know how the government works and how that sort of government bureaucracy works, and some of them may be discouraged by that. And I understand that. I do. I understand. I see people get discouraged for far less, but I think it's important to get the benefits that you deserve. And that's the whole point of this topic is, how can we make sure that, you're getting the benefits you deserve? Well, first of all, as Amanda mentioned, you need to apply for them. And during that process, let's give some advice here. During that process, let's say I apply. I'm a veteran, I get out, I apply for VA disability. I have my reasons, 1, 2, 3, here's what they are. Isn't the goal just to go be as totally honest and forthright as possible with the VA about everything that you're experiencing and, what you brought to the military and what happened during your service? I mean, just be totally honest, right?
Yeah, when we do hearings or when I prep a client to go to a C&P exam, I tell them that this is the time to be brutally honest about how it is on your worst day. This isn't the time to be the tough Marine and to suck it up and to pretend like everything's okay. When you're going to the VA, you're effectively asking them to compensate you for your injuries. And so you need to be really honest about how bad they are. A lot of times I'll also recommend that a spouse go with them to an exam, because the spouse often sees things and is able to articulate them to the examiner in a more, brutal way, I guess, for lack of a better word, so that they can really get what they're looking for. The majority of the cases that I see that are underrated, especially for psychological, is because the veteran's having a hard time with the examiner who, you walk into an examiner's room, you've never spoken to them before, you don't know who they are, and they expect you to talk to them about you have thoughts of suicide at times. It's hard to do, but it's important that you are brutally honest.
Yeah, I think bringing the spouse or even just a support person, whether that's a brother or sister or a best friend, is a very good idea. Someone who knows you well, because we're all sort of conditioned to say, no, I'm fine. I'm okay. I mean, if you're really upset and someone says, are you okay? The first thing you're going to say before you even think about it is, I'm fine. We're sort of conditioned to that. Now think about all the tough folks in the military who are beyond conditioned, for that. So yeah, being open and honest, I think, is the most important thing there, and just get it all out on the table. From the people I've talked to, they wish they had done that. And that's where my advice is coming from is, people who went and got a rating and went, yeah, I should have told them about this. I should have told them about that. I just don't want to go through the whole thing again. Well, you should, because you deserve it. And that's something that is a benefit that you've earned. And so you should do it. And if you need help doing it, obviously veteranslaw.com, Amanda's here. That's what she's here to do. She's here to provide support. Another question for you. So can we get into some do's, don'ts? Like, especially if you're in an appeal or something like that, like what are things you should not do if you're, filing a claim or in the process of an appeal?
One of the biggest ones is to be proactive. So that's to what you should do. And the don't part of it is don't assume that the VA is going to do everything that they're supposed to do. Easy example is they are supposed to get a copy of your service treatment records. They are supposed to pull your VA medical center records. But if you don't, one, tell them which VA medical centers you went to, they won't pull them. Two, they will try to pull them. They'll make efforts to do it. But if for some reason, even if it's a mistake that the VA medical center comes back and says, we don't have any records for that person, then the VA will just go ahead and make their decision. So one, being proactive, don't assume they're going to do it, do what they're supposed to do. And three, again, I'm going to say don't do it alone, because when you're working with a representative, even if it's in your initial claims process, a veteran service officer, they're going to help you with that kind of thing to make sure that the VA has your records. Another big mistake I see that veterans make all the time too is, say they got private treatment for the last 20 years for their back at, say, Sharp Hospital, and they pull their records from Sharp Hospital, and if 20 years of records is obviously going to be thousands of pages, and many of them may have nothing to do with the back injury that you're pursuing. If you expect the VA to go through those thousands of pages and find maybe 10 places where you complained about your back, you're expecting too much from the VA. So pulling out those key records instead of sending thousands, and only send the 15, 30 pages maybe to the VA. I see that mistake being made all the time. And the other one you touched on already, which is not being completely open with the examiner, knowing that the veteran, when you file a claim, you are going to have to go to examination. The VA requires it. So just prepping for that. And a good representative will help you in prepping for that.
Did you know that if you have 100% disability rating, that you can get your student loans eliminated?
I did know that. We just had one of our clients who emailed me, and she finished law school, and she's got $130,000 dismissed because she's 100% disabled.
I am making a video about that very soon. I just found this out. I had no idea. Here in San Diego County, you can get 20% off your tax bill,
Right.
which is nice. Other areas of the country, you can get 100% off your real estate tax bill. But in San Diego County, you have 20%, but you have to be 100%. So if you're 90% disability rating, then you're not getting that. But if you're 100%, you can get rid of student loans, which is crazy. This is the only way to get rid of student loans. You can't even BK student loans.
No.
I mean, literally the only way to just get rid of them is to have 100% disability rating from the
Right.
VA. And so that's a very, very powerful thing too. And I hope that we can reach a lot of people with this information, so that number one, if you're an older veteran, you've avoided this, please take the opportunity. Do it. Let us give you what you've earned and what you deserve. If you did your examination, you got a 10% or 20%, but you've been experiencing pain, you've been experiencing issues, things that you didn't cover with the examiner when you initially went in, you can revisit that. That is something you can revisit if things have changed, things have gotten worse. So keep that in mind, please. And if things do get worse over time as well, even though you may have been rated for that particular injury or ailment, if it gets worse, that's also reason to revisit. So that's another really big one. And if you need help with an appeal, veteranslaw.com, the Veterans Law Group. Obviously, Amanda's here today. I want to bring you a resource so that you know that you don't have to fight this on your own. In fact, it's much better if you have someone who knows how to navigate these waters, do it with you. Amanda, any other do's or don'ts or tips or tricks that you can share with us on the way out here?
Oh, one thing I just want to make sure that your audience knows is that getting that 100% rating is not always an easy thing to do. And it's important to know that even if you can't get it just based upon your individual ailments, if you're struggling with holding down a job and providing for your family, the VA does have an unemployment benefit, which makes you be paid at the 100% rate, even if you're only overall at 80%. And that was one of the changes that happened with the dismissal of the student loans, is they used to not consider that 100%. They wouldn't consider what they call TDIU, and they are now doing that. So that's one of the ways in which you can get paid at that 100%, even if your total disabilities only add up to 40%. There's ways in which you can get paid at the 100% level. So my whole thing is, if you're struggling with holding down a job and providing for your family, reach out and see if you qualify for that one.
Tremendous stuff. Amanda Manier, thank you so much, from the Veterans Law Group, veteran advocate, for coming today and sharing your knowledge with us. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Great to have you. And I will show you the website here, veteranslaw.com, right here in San Diego. Office right there in Poway. If you need help with a claim with the VA, or if you need to revisit something, or if you have just never gone. Listen, I know that I talked to a lot of people who just never went through the process. They didn't want to go through the bureaucracy, or they felt like, I'm fine. But then 10 years later, you realize, gosh, I'm not fine. It's never too late to go back and apply for that benefit that you have earned. Remember, this is something you've earned. This is part of the contract. The government owes you this. We, the people is the government. We owe you this, and we want to give it to you because we believe that you deserve it. Please share this with your friends. Thank you for tuning in. You are now smarter than everyone else. We'll see you soon.